Hey everybody, thanks for joining us. We are having some slight technical issues, so we are going to get started this way. So we are really excited to have two really great authors with us tonight. We've got Drew Murray here to talk about his debut novel, Broken Genius. He is a native of Ontario, Canada. After a corporate career in technology, he has transitioned into education and writing. He's an avid fan of comic cons, escape rooms, and board games, which positions him well as the author of Broken Genius, his debut novel. He lives with his family in London, Ontario. We're super excited to have Kelley Armstrong with us here too. We've been huge fans of hers at the store for years, so we're excited to, I think this is the first official event we've done with Kelley, so we're thrilled to be doing it, even if it's digitally. She is the author of the Grafton thriller series, standalone thrillers beginning with Wherever She Goes and The Royal Guide to Monster Slaying, middle grade fantasy series. Past works include the Otherworld Urban Fantasy series, the Canesville Gothic Mystery series, the Nadia Stafford Thriller Anthology, the Darkest Powers and Darkest Rising Teen Paranormal series, and the Age of Legends Teen Fantasy series. Kelley, I don't know how you get any sleep ever. So I am going to turn it over to Kelley and Drew, and they are going to chat for a little bit, and I will be back with some fan questions a little bit later.
Okay. Thank you. Just making sure that, sorry, just now that we had this, I opened up my mail and I want it closed so we don't get any dings happening.
Yeah. Good idea.
Yeah, no kidding. So we've known each other for quite a while. We started off working together. We worked in a bank in Canada. It's what I often refer to as my corporate cubicle job, where I was working at a job while writing, trying to get published. So I left there, I think it was about 2001, shortly after Bitten came out. I left, and you stayed on. Years later, we reconnected because we were planning to get back into writing, or more seriously into writing. And we had talked, and I had mentioned that I had a writers group, and you had joined it. So you went ahead and you wrote a book, and the first thing that you wrote immediately got picked up by an agent and sold to a publisher, right? That's how that works.
Yeah, for sure. That's exactly what happened. No, it took a lot longer than that. I wrote I've written so many books as attempts to learn how to do this. But my first serious book that I wrote was when I took a parental leave when my son was born. And I said, I'm going to be at home with a baby. That's a great time to write. In short blocks anyway, while Colin was sleeping. But so I wrote a book and thought, geez, this is it. This is my chance. I'm going to write a book, and then I'll get an agent, and away we go. And no, it doesn't work out that way. It was a great learning experience in how to write a book. So I wrote that. I did it again when my daughter was born. I took a parental leave, and I wrote another novel. But it really wasn't until I wrote Broken Genius that was the novel I felt that was worthy of really pushing out there with an agent and really trying to make it to published status.
Good. So tell us a bit about Broken Genius.
Sure. It is about Will Parker, who is a genius, former Silicon Valley tech CEO, whose life completely blows up one night in 2011. Something disastrous happens. It blows up his personal life, his professional life. Everything kind of falls apart on him. And when the story picks up, we see that he's now joined the FBI as a way to try and make up for something that happened, something that went wrong. And he is now with the FBI. He's in the cybercrime division, and he gets called to the scene of a murder at a Comic-Con where they detect radiation that matches the radiation signature of a quantum computer his company was trying to buy when everything fell apart. So he gets pulled into this mystery, and as it turns out, there's various bidders who are trying to buy this thing in an auction that's going on in the dark web. There's Chinese hackers, and there's Russian criminals working for the Kremlin, and desperate corporate executives. So there's all kinds of people chasing after this. And so we see Will as he's trying to get to it first.
Okay, so yeah, the tech part there is obvious for you. Like me, that's our background. Tech, computers, IT, coding. But one thing that is a little different here is the Comic-Con setting. I love Comic-Cons, and I've seen them used in TV shows, mystery TV shows will set one episode at at a Comic-Con, where they
Mhm.
tend to just make a whole lot of fun of Comic-Cons. But I have not seen it done nearly as often in thrillers. Can you tell us why you chose to set Broken Genius there?
I like contrast, and I really like you say, I like Comic-Cons. I've been to many Comic-Cons. I really enjoy it. And one of the things I like best about Comic-Con is the really positive, welcoming environment. It's such a happy place. And everybody's doing their own thing. Everybody's celebrating their favorite fandoms. And I thought, as a lot of thrillers write, how can I take something that's nice and wonderful and pure and make it dark? And so while I was sitting at a Comic-Con, I thought to myself, what if there was something going on that was beneath the surface of all this fun and lighthearted things that are happening? Well, what if there was something really dark happening? What if somebody was like dead in some remote part of the building? They've been murdered, and you had to solve a murder at this Comic-Con, which creates a great challenge for a mystery, because Comic-Cons are temporary. They happen for a few days and then everybody packs up and leaves. So if you have a murder that's connected in some way to some aspect of that Comic-Con, you've got a limited amount of time to solve the crime before everybody packs up and leaves. So I really like the time crunch sort of race against the clock aspect of setting it at a Comic-Con, as well as taking something fun and having something dark happen there as well.
Yeah, taking something fun. And every good thriller, you need that setting, you need that plot, but you also need the character arc. And Broken Genius is really a redemption story. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Definitely. I mean, that's Will's character. When I thought of his character, it was for a short story competition. And so I thought of, this detective that came from Silicon Valley, and he's really smart. And if he's in Silicon Valley, he's probably pretty wealthy. But I wanted to do something to him that would make him leave that world, but also leave a scar, leave something really wrong with him. And so what happens in the first chapter of the book, it's not really spoiling anything because it's on the dust jacket. Someone dies as a result of a mistake that he makes the night that his life falls apart. And he feels a tremendous amount of guilt over that. This is somebody who's not accustomed to making mistakes. This is someone who's a prodigy. He's gifted. He's talented. So this really throws his world for a loop. It really, crushes him, and his ego falters, and he starts to lose confidence in himself. And in that entrepreneurial space of Silicon Valley, where I had a chance to spend some time and meet the people there, confidence is everything. And when you take confidence away from somebody like that, that becomes a real mountain for them to climb. That is something that affects every aspect of their life. And so this mystery is a chance for him to try and find some redemption for that mistake that he made back in 2011 by solving this mystery, by working through some aspects of what's happening here.
Good. Now, we're going to shift a little bit to the writing process, but also to the process of having a book come out. You've got a book coming out during a pandemic, your debut novel. And I remember when the pandemic started, I was seeing a lot online from authors whose debuts were in March, were in April. And it wasn't until someone reminded me that my first novel, Bitten, came out in late September 2001.
Oh,
so
that's
it
right.
was literally like the week or so after 9/11. All my promo got canceled. Everything got canceled. At the time, it was massive. It felt like, oh my God, I finally got a book published, and this happens. Now, 19 years later, someone had to remind me that my book came out then, because it's all water under the bridge. I moved on from it. How do you feel, releasing a book, your debut book, during this?
It's tough, because a lot of things, like you say, blow up. Like, some media coverage that was planned all got canceled. I mean, like, all of the media resources in every media outlet suddenly had to allocate everything towards coronavirus. So even book reviews. So that was a real disappointment, and some things kind of changed, and there weren't going to be any live signings anymore, which is that moment that a lot of authors really look forward to, myself included. But I had a lot of my launch was already planned to be digital anyway, like social media spaces, live events, live streaming. But, things go wrong with the live streaming too, like what happened tonight. So you have to be really flexible and roll with it, but it's all good. People are still finding the book. People are still excited about it. And, you know, for people that can't go to a Comic-Con this year, it's actually not a bad thing, because here's a book that you can read about being at a Comic-Con and it feels like you're there, which is cool. But I had a lot of things already ready to go virtual, and the publisher looked at what I had done and said, no, we think Drew can do this. So let's continue on, and we'll launch during the pandemic. So it's been interesting, but a lot of virtual things, a lot of electronic things. But it's fun. It's still really exciting. It's still terrific to have the book out. I'm still really happy about it. It's still fun. So we're moving on from here though, and things will settle down, and there's, you know, this will be just one of those things that I tell stories about in the future. Oh, I remember when.
Remember when it had,
you know?
Yeah, exactly. So I have to ask you then, when you're talking about Comic-Cons and COVID, I know you like going to Comic-Cons. How eager are you going to be to jump back into the Comic-Con?
Oh, you know, that's tough, because, you know, I do go to Comic-Cons, multiple Comic-Cons in a year. The first one was already canceled. It was back in March. Obviously, that's not happening. The big one that I go to every year is Fan Expo in the fall. And so they haven't officially canceled yet. So they've been sending out surveys asking people, like, how comfortable would you be? How much space needs to be between you and other people? And would you be comfortable if there was reduced capacity? Or would you still want a picture with a celebrity if you had to stand 6 feet apart? So, you know, they're exploring different avenues to do that. But really, there's a lot of discomfort. I have a lot of discomfort about going to a fan convention, because, you know, you've been to fan cons too, I know, and it's a lot of people in a small area. And sometimes some of those spaces, like when you're moving between buildings, between certain areas, it becomes this real, you know, narrow point where a lot of people get funneled together, and there's really not a way to avoid that. So, not excited about that aspect of it. But, you know, if you could solve the spacing, and I don't mind if I stand 6 feet away from my autograph, that's okay. But yeah, it's going to be, I can't believe that they're going to go forward, but they haven't canceled yet.
Well, I hadn't heard that, because I had heard that, you know, it's so Fan Expo, for those who are outside of our geographic area, is Toronto's big one, which is held at the end of August. And yes, I mean, I've been many times, and I will have to admit that I love Comic-Cons. My least favorite part is the crowds. You know, I'm not good with being, you know, in this very tight lots of people. So if they could actually solve that, I would probably go more often. It will.
There's an opportunity here.
They're known for setting off the, you know, fire. They hit their fire limits and so on. Yep. So yes, it'll be interesting to see how those types of events, they're known for being crowded, and if they're good, they're crowded, will continue moving forward. So yeah, switching gears there, one thing that your book is about FBI. And my standalone thriller coming out later this month does not have law enforcement to any great degree. My Rockton series is in the Yukon and small fictional town, but does center very much. Main character is the detective, and her partner is the sheriff. I've been hearing a lot lately about how much people, considering what's currently going on, how much people are going to want to read books where law enforcement are the main characters. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, that's a tough question. It is a really delicate time right now. Law enforcement is on a lot of people's minds and how they do what they do. When I chose to write about the FBI, it was after a visit to the FBI's field office in New York City that was arranged by a conference called Thriller Fest. And I loved what was going on at the FBI. And one of the things I took away from it was the motivations of the special agents in charge that came to speak to us as a group of writers. It was a whole room full of writers, and they were explaining how the FBI works. And how passionate they are about what they do, and that they are really motivated to help people. And I think, excuse me, when we write law enforcement books, it's important to show law enforcement the way that we want law enforcement to be, to set an example for how law enforcement could be done in a way that doesn't include a lot of the problems that we've been seeing all over on TV and in the news media and media cycles right now. I think it's really important to show that because we want to move forward from here. We want to chart a path where law enforcement can coexist with the citizens that they're meant to protect in a positive way. They should be there to protect us. And it would be really important for us as writers, I think, to be able to show that in our books, to show law enforcement as protectors as they're intended to be. Yeah, what do you think? What are you going to do with Rockdale?
I agree that we tend to show an idealized version of what we know. There are certainly officers like that out there. So we tend to focus on that, unless we're going to be writing the, nemesis or something, we're going to focus on those ones. Well, generally, in most cases, recognizing the various issues that might be happening within a department. So we don't tend to sugarcoat it and pretend that all officers are like this, but we're trying to show people who are the characters who are genuinely passionate and dedicated to being in a serving and helping profession. So yes, I expect that there will be some sort of switch. I feel like you're doing FBI. That'll probably be a little bit easier. There might be a little bit more resistance to reading about general, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that can be reimagined both in real life and in fiction to adapt, because we're constantly adapting and saying, what do we want to talk about in fiction and in real life. So, yeah,
definitely.
and it is. It's a very interesting issue. When I first saw people talking about it in fiction, how are they going to handle law enforcement? It took me a moment. I'm like, what? Oh, yes. Now I see where there may be some issues going forward with that. So it's interesting times, right?
Absolutely.
So I will close with my probably final question before we see if there are any other ones. Would be what you're working on next. I already know this, but I'm just like your push.
I'm working on a couple of different projects now. I'm always working on more than one project, and definitely there's going to be more Will Parker adventures. I have an idea of what's next for him. I can't say a lot about it because Broken Genius ends and there's a little ambiguity there, and I don't want to resolve that just yet. So I can't say where Will's going to be, but he's going to be solving more mysteries with that sort of future just around the corner level of technology. But there's definitely more to come for him, and I'm going to bring out more of the secondary characters that were in Broken Genius that I really enjoyed, and I didn't have enough time on the page to really dive deep into their characters. So there will be some more familiar faces from the first book coming in the sequel too. Very good.
Okay, let's see whether there are any questions. I don't know whether anyone's there on the other end.
All right, so we had a couple first, and you mentioned this already, Drew, but so you mentioned that you a Thriller Fest. So the question was, have you been to mystery conventions versus Comic-Cons, and what are some of the differences between the two of them?
No, wildly different. Number one, at mystery book conventions, you don't see a lot of costumes.
Yep.
There's not a lot of cosplay.
Zero costumes, really.
Well, I did see one once at BoucherCon last year because it happened to take place on Halloween. There was one brave soul that brought a costume to wear. And to her great credit, she wore it. And I asked her about it. She said, I had to make so much room in my suitcase for it. I'm going to wear it whether anybody else is wearing one or not. But yeah, that's the biggest difference. And then it's, it's writers versus TV celebrities. And TV celebrities tend to be a little more exuberant in how they present their material than writers.
I convinced the Murder by the Book staff to, we all dressed up as the Scooby Gang at BoucherCon because it was Halloween, but we apparently
that's awesome.
completely missed the costume contest because we were at publisher dinners. So we showed up in the bar after the costume contest, all dressed as the Scooby Gang.
That's awesome.
And then, so I had a question for Kelley as well, and that was, are there any genres that you haven't written yet that you want to?
Any genres that I haven't written yet that I want to? You know, the more I get asked this question further down in my in my career, the tougher it gets to actually answer it. And really not. I mean, I've got something coming out in the fall, which I've been sort of playing with for years, which is haunted house, time slip, Victorian romance mystery. So it's a little stronger in the romance than I usually do, and the time slip means that there's historical there, which I love reading historical. I'm terrified of writing it. So this way, with the time travel, you get a little bit easier because your narrator is from our world, and therefore, if I mess up on some things in the past, hopefully it can be through her. But I did a lot of research for those smaller sections to actually take place in the past, and it taught me that I'll probably never want to do something set entirely there, no matter how much I enjoy reading them.
And Drew, since this is your first novel, has there been anything kind of about the publishing world or the publishing process that surprised you that wasn't kind of what you thought it was going to be?
You know, I think the thing that surprised me most was once books are in the hands of retailers, how little you're connected to that process anymore. And that's directly related to what's going on with the pandemic because, you know, some of the logistics networks have been challenged in getting the books. I know that our distributors getting them out as fast as they can, but, you know, some places have had a challenge getting them. But, you know, like Kelley said, everybody will be patient. I'll barely remember this later on. But yeah, I thought, you know, I could just call up anybody and say, hey, you know, where's my book? And that's just not the case, unless it's a great independent bookstore like Murder by the Book, which is awesome to be able to call, but you don't have any connections at all to like the big chains or anything like that, which is another great argument for independent bookstores.
And so this is kind of for both of you guys with kind of the pandemic happening and everybody being on lockdown, you know, being kind of writers, which is sort of a kind of solitary thing. How has this changed your daily routine, or has it changed your daily routine?
Go ahead, Drew. You go first.
I'm not alone anymore. I used to have quiet times during the day when there was nobody in the house, just me and the dog. But now, you know, the kids are at home doing school from home. My wife is at home working from home. So there's not a time when there's nobody in the house. So it's, you know, there's a lot more of the noise canceling headset time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I found it's not a whole lot different other than this is usually the time when I'm traveling. So I usually stay home all winter and write. And then spring is heavier on travel, both for work and for fun. But obviously that's all gone. So I've been writing, and I've been lucky that I'm able to write. And I say lucky, people have been, other writer friends have been really struggling to write right now. But for me, productivity is a way of dealing with stress. So my dealing with stress is to throw myself into writing. So when someone says, "Oh, it's great that you can write," I'm like, well, yes, but I'm not just able to forget everything and write. This is actually how I cope. And there are people who cope with it by throwing themselves into work, and others who just cannot focus. So I'm in the throw myself into writing. So hopefully this will end soon so that I'm not like writing nonstop forever.
And so do you think that this is something that you guys, we've been asking kind of everybody this question, do you think kind of the COVID situation is something that you will work into a book, or is it something that you're going to kind of steer completely clear of?
I know, yeah, I think Personally, I'm going to steer clear of it. It is an interesting thing, though, and I had tweeted about this a while back. So the book that comes out later this month, Every Step She Takes, was set in June 2020.
Oh.
Now, the book was actually due to come out later this year, but they moved it up to June. But clearly what was happening could not have been happening. And I never do that. I never set anything in the future for that exact reason. But I was working with a past timeline and a present timeline, and I wanted to go with 15 years and some tech that was available in 2005 was not available in 2004. So I had to set the past in 2005, which meant that I put the present in 2020 thinking what could possibly happen, right? So I had to go back in and change all the date references. So it's now 14 years ago and it's now 2019, because there is no way that they are running around New York like everything is normal in June of 2020.
And I have a project that I'm working on that's set in New York City. So being set in New York City, I feel like I have to address it. So it was a matter of trying to figure out, like, so I'll set the book in the future, like a year or two from now, and then try and think about what the pandemic would have meant to the characters that are in New York, how that would have affected them, how that would have affected their business, so that I can refer to it not as a feature of the story, but just acknowledge that it happened because it's changing life in New York City. So I have to change the book to reflect that. And I have to make my best guesses right now and, edit later.
And since you guys both, as Kelley mentioned, kind of both come from tech backgrounds, when you're using tech in your fiction, how do you balance kind of, because that stuff changes so fast sometimes, how do you balance what potentially might not work the way that it did when you were writing the book by the time the book comes out? Are you aware of that, or you just kind of ignore that and just do what you're doing?
Go ahead, Drew.
With mine, I try to set it, I do two things. I try and set the tech just a little ahead of where we are, and imagine just what's possible just around the corner. But then I try and keep things fairly generic. Like I don't refer to specific functions or aspects of technology or features, because like the last thing you want to do is refer to a BlackBerry, when BlackBerry's like gone in 6 years or whatever it took. So I try to be more generic in how I'm referring to technology, with a few notable exceptions and Broken Genius. But, I thought it was a pretty safe bet that MacBooks would be around for a long time.
Exactly. And yeah, I try to be very generic when I'm dealing with the present stuff. I don't say what type of phone somebody is using. I don't get deeply into the features unless I have to for something specific to do with it. So you're mentioning BlackBerry, that book that comes out later this month. Yes, in 2005, what is the character going to be using is a BlackBerry. So I had to do all the research on like what type of, what type of browsers they had, and that's much easier now to look back and set something in a certain time period. But if you're to take it now and want it to be, I don't always put a year on things. So you might not be certain whether a story took place in 2015, 2017, 2020, and you want that flexibility if it doesn't have to be set in time. So with the tech, you want it to be flexible too, so that nobody reads it. If they see BlackBerry and they thought that this was a current story, they suddenly realize this book is actually, 15 years ago.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Everybody that's been tuning in, we've been talking with Drew Murray about his book, Broken Genius, and Kelley Armstrong, who has a new book called Every Step She Takes coming out at the end of June. We will have signed book plates available for both authors. We are still closed at the moment for browsing, but you can give us a call at 713-524-8597 to place orders. We're doing curbside pickup. We're also available at murderbooks.com for placing orders. Thank you guys so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.